Hello, hello, hello. Welcome. My name is Amy Tiemeyer. I'm here with Helping the Brave, and today I get to bring in a great guest that is a connection of Ed, and he's actually missing today. But let me go ahead and bring in Jeric. So, Jeric, welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Jeric, you served in the U.S. Army, correct?
Yes, I served in the United States Army, 91 to 95 active, and then I stayed in the reserves till 99. So,
Very cool.
yeah,
Well, thank you for your service.
I
And we
appreciate
always start everybody off with, why did you choose the branch that you chose?
it. Well, like everyone, I'm sure it's a long story, but it was time I graduated high school, and it was time for me to do something besides just become a loser. So I had a friend who looked me, he was a Marine, and he recommended the military. And this is the silliest thing. I think back to it today, what a decision this was. But I said, military? I don't want to join the military. I like to party. And he said to me, dude, I've never partied harder than when I was in the Marines. And that convinced me to join the military. So I went right down to Recruiter Row, one of those strip malls that has all four recruiters right next to them. And I'll be honest with you, the first branch that I walked into was the Air Force. And, I was right out of high school, so I didn't know nothing. And the recruiter basically told me, well, what do you got to offer? And I didn't really have anything to offer, I guess. So I walked right next door to the Army, and it was an entirely different experience. The recruiter was like, hey, come on in, have a seat. Can I get you something to drink? What's your name? And I guess I was hooked. And so that's why I joined the Army.
Well, that's cool. Well, it's funny because I always talk, my dad wanted me to go into the Marine Corps,
Mm-hmm.
and the Marines were like not super interested, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the Army was. But we had a guest a long time ago, and she went into the Air Force because they took her out for a steak dinner, and the Army only gave her Subway. So it's been kind of fun to hear everybody's
Yeah.
stories and just kind of where it went from there. So, what did you do in the Army, and where did you get stationed?
Sure. I was a 31 mic, which at the time was a multi-channel communications operator. Basically, I operated these big multiplexing radios, and I set up antennas and shot it to a distant end, or maybe I worked on a satellite system. My first duty station was in Germany. It was towards the end of Desert Storm. My unit, when I arrived in Germany, was actually over in the desert at that time. And so I was part of a skeleton crew for a good 2 or 3 weeks. And when they returned, of course, I was the youngest, lowest ranking private there, and I hadn't, been overseas with the rest of them. And then they immediately got their deactivation order, so we didn't get any new privates. So for the entire year I was there, I was the lowest ranking private. So that was a lot of fun. And I was also at Fort Bragg, North Carolina after that. I was in South Korea for a while in Daegu. And then when I got out, I joined the reserves up in Northern California.
Okay, so when you got out, was there any transition services? Did you have a plan of what you were doing next?
Well, I knew I was going to go to school. I was ready by this time. I was eager to get into college. And, I didn't know much back then because we didn't have the internet, of course. But I did know that you could get into college. You could get out of the service early if you could show that you were enrolled in college. So I had my dad get me enrolled in, school up in Sacramento, and it didn't quite work, but that's okay. I got out and I went straight to school. I do remember that there were a couple of classes to help me write my resume or transition, but to tell you the truth, there wasn't much back then, and I didn't know any veterans when I got out. I was like the only veteran I knew. even when I started going to school, I hadn't met any veterans. It just wasn't a thing back then. And yeah, so no, I kind of had to figure things out on my own and just start going to school and using the GI Bill and go from there.
So what did you go to school for?
Well, originally I started junior college and I went to business school. I figured I'd become a businessman, or at least having a business degree as your base degree would help in whatever field that you went into. But about 2 years into school, I'm getting ready to wrap up my associates, and I have to take this elective. So I took an art history class, and quite honestly, it blew my mind. And I realized my true calling. It wasn't to be a businessman, I was working in automobile wholesaling at the time or something like that. It was to become an artist. And I'd seen all these advertisements for the Academy of Art in San Francisco. And, I'd gone to San Francisco quite a bit because I was in Sacramento, and, that was like a big city. And I just knew what I had to do. I sold everything I owned. I moved to San Francisco, and I went to school for, essentially it was called new media, but it was like web design, visual effects, motion graphics, and that kind of stuff. So
Very cool.
yeah.
Did you have a favorite project that you worked on when you started going down the road you wanted to go down?
Well, what I did is I started volunteering at the local public access station. And so I got trained in using all the different types of equipment, like studio equipment and cameras, and you could check it out and do stuff. And eventually I got to the point where I could have my own regular television series on public access. So I had a monthly television show. I call it, I had, this is silly, I had a teddy bear from when I was a kid called Flocko. And so I called it the Flocko Report, tried to make it all kind of like spy versus spy kind of, but comedy at the same time. And it became pretty popular in San Francisco in the public access realm. In fact, two of my shows in particular were reoccurring favorites that they would show all the time. So
that's exciting. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, that was fun.
So it's interesting that you said you that through volunteering you kind of got to spread your wings and figure some things out that is harder to figure out when it's your job versus when you're volunteering.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it gave me experience. It gave me actual experience working with others and teams. And, I think that's something that I really missed from the military is I loved working in the team environment and having a mission, and you're with this team that you're just thrown together with. You don't know them from anyone. And then all of a sudden you're in this environment for a good week or 2 weeks where 24/7, you've got a mission that you're working on, and then you return. And so I base a lot of my the programs that I create on that concept, the teamwork, working in teams, and creating a project and completing a mission.
So, question we actually haven't, I don't think, asked for a while now, but it would be really interesting. What do you feel you use now or still that you learned in the military?
Wow. I got out of the military over, close to 30 years now, 30 years ago. And although I learned a lot of skills that helped me when I just got out, I believe those skills have developed over the years. But working in the veteran realm, I've learned a lot about project management. I've learned a lot of soft skills working with volunteers, learning how to raise an army of volunteers. And I do attribute a lot of that to the tenacity that I had in the military, that I was taught, once you have a mission, you can complete your mission. You just got to do it.
Right.
You got to figure out how it needs to be done and implement the steps and get there. So I think that's what drives me a lot.
Okay. So Ed wanted me to ask, how did you get involved in the American Legion? What are you doing with them
Sure.
now?
Yeah, well, I finished up school up in San Francisco, and I was working for a TV show for a while, but that TV show ended. Well, there's a long story behind it, but basically I moved down to Los Angeles because essentially I was working in television, and my little sister moved down here. So, we decided to get a place together. And when I got here, I had a buddy who I was in the military with who kind of showed me around. One night we got together, we jumped in the car and went driving around. And I moved. I mean, I live in essentially Hollywood. In fact, right outside my door, if you stand on my patio, you can look right up the canyon and see the Hollywood sign. I live in the original Hollywood Land neighborhood. And so we were driving around Hollywood, and he had a few days prior, he had, gone to a burger bar, and he was sitting next to an older gentleman who he struck up a conversation with. And that guy was the drama teacher at Hollywood High School, but he was also a Legionnaire, and he belonged to Hollywood Post 43 of the American Legion. And so my buddy, I was driving around with my buddy, and I'm telling him, I need to network. I need to find work, people who work in the entertainment industry. How do I meet these people? And he's like, oh man, hey, I just met this guy the other night. Hollywood, he works, he's at the Hollywood Post. It's all veterans. It's all people who work in entertainment. You should go there. And so I did. And I looked them up. I went there. And, once I walked into that building, it just blew me away. It was built back in 1928. It's called Art Deco Revival or Egyptian Revival is the style of the building. And it's a monument to World War I, the entire building itself. And there was all these pictures around, all this history. And there was a bunch of veterans. And I'll admit, I was the youngest guy there. I was, a little bit over 30, but everyone else was they're well over 50, which isn't that old now that I think about it, but they were well over 50. But, I saw an opportunity there. I saw that I was the only young person. I had all these video skills, and I thought, wow, I could do a documentary or something. And I started getting involved. And right off the bat, at the time, this was the early 2000s, the American Legion was going through a phase where they were dying out. What had happened is a lot of the World War II vets weren't very accepting of the Vietnam guys, and they almost skipped a generation. And so these World War II guys are finally figuring out, they're like, hey, we're not going to be around that much longer, and we need to train our future leaders, and we need to bring in the young people. And here's a young man right here who seems eager and willing to participate. So they gave me that mission. They said, you must bring in the young people. That is your mission. And I took that very seriously. I got into the chain of command. I created programs. I mean, it started off with just a singer-songwriter night and a bar night and karaoke night. It grew to a sports team, a running team, a baseball team. And, and it grew from there. We started having competitions and programs, and just the young people slowly but surely started trickling in. And I think that the biggest factor in this, I think back to it, the biggest factor was consistency, that I was there every time. If a new person showed up, it was important that someone was there to welcome them and show them that this is a place that you want to be. And so I shook a lot of hands. I eventually became commander in 2010 of Hollywood Post 43. I was the youngest commander ever, even to this day. I was the first Desert Storm era veteran to become commander. And by that time I became commander in 2010, we had reached 50% post 9/11 veteran membership. So I feel that I reached my goal. And ever since there, I've been a true Legionnaire. I've been on the executive committee for at least 10 years. And now for my career, I actually work for the national organization in the media and communications department. I'm a visual media specialist. I cover the West Coast in terms of video, news, all that sort of stuff.
So let me ask you a question. So listening to your story, I would almost think that not as much consistency as trying things, like, giving opportunities for people to be involved in diverse ways. Like, I can appreciate the consistency of you being the same face in each thing. But in my area, I also feel like trying things. Like, I think sometimes our traditional veteran service organizations are so used to their lanes that they don't always have the creativity. And so, and I'll give you an example for AUSA. I came up with our Zombie Apocalypse 5K, and it ended up being a big hit up here at Joint Base Lewis McChord because it engaged a younger demographic, and it was silly and fun. And some of the older AUSA members were not quite so sure about it, right? You know, they didn't know if it crossed a line of, I don't want to say efficacy, but
Sure. Decorum, maybe.
decorum. Yeah. And I, you know, listening to what you said, trying different things, I think appeals to a younger demographic simply because then you can find your area, right?
Yeah.
And for when organizations allow younger members to try things, then it just builds community, even if it doesn't work. I have found.
I would agree. I think I agree with you completely. Trying different things, but on top of that, giving ownership to new members, giving them a responsibility, so they had a say in how those things were being created. It wasn't just being forced on them. They were actually participating, and I think that had a lot to do with retention as well.
Well, and as weird as it sounds, and I also think humor, like when you try things, like I did a tire flip for charity. So I had like a retired general officers, like, I am not going anywhere near that tire, but I will be here in support of you. And, you know, just all sorts of different things that I think builds relationships, right? It's not the big things, it's the little things
Yeah.
where
Yes.
we actually build trust, where we build camaraderie. It's in the little things. So, what is going on with the American Legion and you right now?
Well, I'm glad you asked. You know, I'm in Hollywood. This is Hollywood Post. And one thing that I found out, one of the best ways to draw young veterans is with work. I would say that the number one thing that they're looking for when they get out of the military is a job. And so I found that by creating opportunities where they can either work towards getting a job and work with others in a project type setting, it really brings people together, and it gives them something that they can add to their portfolio so they can find a job. So I get a lot of engagement when it's something that involves building their career. So being in Hollywood, you know, we work quite a bit with the entertainment industry, and quite a few of our members are involved in the entertainment industry, either as producers, directors, writers, camera operators, actors, editors, uh, journalists, everything, lighting, special effects. We got it all. And so I thought, how can we bring everyone together so that they can work in teams on projects that they can use to put on their portfolio, that they can use to gain work, and that they can take these teams that they've built and move forward as connections in the future. And we came up with what we called it last year was our member-made media competition, where teams would sign up, and then we would give them an opportunity to film inside of our clubhouse, our historic clubhouse, and put together a short film. And at the end, when they all compiled their short films, we have a beautiful theater. It's the Hollywood Legion Theater. In fact, we have screenings there all the time, from everything like recently we had Halo. We had, I wrote down some other ones, but we have some big screenings there. We had the Lord of the Rings had their Academy Awards party there when it happened. I mean, all sorts of stuff like that. So we had a big screening and award ceremony in our theater. So these teams got to actually show their films on the big screen to a large audience. And at the end of that, we gave away trophies, just like at the Academy Awards. Best director, best writer, best acting, all of those types of awards. And it was a huge success. A lot of the members said it felt like it was our very own Veterans Academy Awards. So building on that success, we're doing that again this year. And the competition is just getting started. And the first thing that we're looking for is submissions of a script and a treatment that are 10 minutes or less. And the theme this year is comedy. So basically, if someone wanted to participate, we would look for a team of a director, a producer, and a writer to submit a script and a treatment. And we're using a platform called Film Freeway. And we're partnering with Veteran Entertainment Television, VET TV, and in fact, their CEO, Waco Hoover, is going to be one of our celebrity judges who actually judges these films. But we have a team, they're helping us with a team of directors and writers who are going to judge all of these short scripts. And on December 15th, we're going to select 5 of them to move forward and actually produce their scripts in the Hollywood Post Clubhouse. And those 5 will be screened in our theater, and we'll have that award ceremony again. So yeah, it's a great competition. We're really looking forward to it.
Do you reach out to other military service organizations or veteran service organizations to get the word out?
Absolutely. Last year, we just kind of advertised it within our post and within the Legion and stuff, and we got a decent turnout, but we feel that this is something that should be open to all veterans, really. Yes, this is open to all veterans, and we are reaching out to various organizations. Like I said, we're partnering with VET TV, and I'm reaching out to podcasts such as yourself to help spread the word. And
so, how does somebody get in contact with you to get like all the details, or where do they go?
Absolutely. Well, we have a website for the competition. It's veteranmadefilmcompetition.org. Or they can go to the Film Freeway platform. That's filmfreeway.com, and I believe it's /veteran-made film competition. But yeah, go to the website. You'll learn all about it. You'll see pictures from last year. You'll see the people holding their trophies up on stage. We had a red carpet. The rules are there, and then there's also a link where you can go to the submission page and participate.
Perfect. Does that look right? Because I'm not a great speller.
Oh, I don't see it on the thing. I'll type it in the chat. Let's
Perfect.
See.
But I just want to make sure that those that are interested can get involved with your group, because, all of the things that Ed and I, the reason why we have our podcast is because we feel like there's information silos. So maybe, like the American Legion is great about communicating to Legionnaires, but maybe not so much people who are part of the VFW or part of merging vets and players or different things like that. And if we can kind of cross through some and just communicate veteran to veteran, we can share different resources and different things.
I absolutely agree. I looked into it recently. In terms of veterans nonprofits, there are thousands and thousands of veteran nonprofits out there. It's amazing. And, yes, I do feel that working together and collaborating, brings more people together. Not everyone's a member of the Legion. I realize that, not everyone's. So I got to cross over those boundaries and interact with different groups, and we are. So
well, and I think what we've talked about, like Ed and I, it's we know that isolation is a huge contributor to the problem with not normalizing mental health issues. And so for us, it is really important to try to share all these ways in which we can be inclusive, or we can connect. Like I'm not tech savvy. I'm not this. I don't traditionally ride bikes, but if we are all communicating, maybe I find the areas in which I can find my tribe, and other people find the areas that they can. So I know, hey, there's this bike riding group that's this place, so I can share that. And you can go, these are the things that we have, but if it doesn't fit for you, I know of this resource. So I love that.
Absolutely.
So we'll definitely keep, anybody reaches out to us, we'll forward them to you. And, we want them to try connect and contribute, right?
You know, on that note, there's a saying that I love, and it's our national judge advocate of the American Legion. His name is Mark Seavey. He says this all the time, that whenever veterans come together and then there's an activity, there's going to be therapy happening. And so, you know, I'm a true believer in that it doesn't matter the activity. It just matters that you get a group of veterans together to do it together. And that's what's important.
I agree. So is there anything else that you want to share about your about the Legion, about you know
one thing that I really appreciate, that I'm starting to really appreciate as I get a little bit older, is mentoring. I love being a mentor. What I really appreciate is I've been in this so long that I've seen young people come along and grow and develop to where now they're mentoring young people, where they're successful, and it's a great feeling. I mean, we had this young guy. I'll just mention a couple of names. Andre Andrews. You know, when he first came to Hollywood Post, he was what do we call it? All thrust and no vector, just all over the place. You know, he had ideas left, right, and center. And you know, I worked with him in quite a bit of different ways, and he was still very young. Well, nowadays, you know, he kept working on his visions, and to the point where he started his own nonprofit. I think it's called Warriors Road, where he takes veterans horse riding. And so that's great therapy. And now he's getting into the whole video game realm, which is, I think, a great realm for the veteran, because you get to interact with other veterans from your own home, really. So you don't have to make that voyage outside sometimes. You know, you can do it from the comfort of your own home. So I really am embracing the whole video game aspect in the veteran realm.
I think that's very smart, because almost all of my veteran friends play video games. You know, my husband and I are by far in the minority of not being video gamers. And it is, I think the Army and other services are utilizing video games to get, you know, for recruiting, for all sorts of different things. So I think it makes a lot of sense to go into that realm, as far as, you know, whether it's group therapy and that can look so different. So I do have a question. When you think of mentoring someone, what do you look for? What characteristics do you look at and say, I could help this person?
Well, I would, first of all, they have to have a desire in them. They have to show that they have a goal, that they want to achieve something, that there's a glimmer of light in their eyes. You know, I think if they want to achieve something and they want to set their path, then I'm happy to advise them on what's a good decision, a bad decision, how to put together a proposal. You know, anyone who wants to create an activity, I'll be happy to show you how to present that in front of a committee to get approval or funding or anything along those lines. So I look for future leaders. I look for people who are brave enough to actually stand up and say, I want to do this, and I'm willing to actually put it on paper. And in fact, that's the first thing that I tell anybody who approaches me with an idea is, well, come back to me once you've put it on paper. Because anyone can just talk and say, oh, why don't we do this, that, and the other? I got this idea. But transferring that idea to the written word makes all the difference. It really helps you organize your thoughts, and it shows others that you're serious about this. This isn't just some fly-by-night idea. You actually invested time and effort into it. So I look for future leaders, and I advise them on how they can get their ideas approved.
You know, I think I do a talk about the worst interview I ever was a part of. And I was hiring for a teller, because I was managing a credit union, actually 2 branches. And the young lady that I talk about, she knows I talk about her. But it was the worst interview ever. But the one thing that I walked away with is she was completely honest and transparent, which in my mind is very courageous, right? And so I always talk to people about looking for a person, like you said, that has the glint in their eyes, but it oftentimes isn't necessarily the best dress. Like there's some people who just need like this much help, just a small amount of help. And there's people who are rougher around the edges, but actually might have more effort for the game. And so I love that you shared, you saw this gentleman had all these ideas.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't that he was 98% perfect and you needed to bring him the other 2% of the way. Is that maybe he was 70% perfect, but you saw all of the potential.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And there are other types that you need to mentor as well. Not everyone is a leader. And
That's
sometimes people just need to get out of their shell. Sometimes they just need someone to listen to them. A lot of people come to me with ideas, and I'll listen to every person who comes and stands in front of me and talks. And I'll give you patience, and I'll listen intently. And I think a lot of times my motto is lead by example. I want to set the example of what I expect expect from the future, what I expect people what I expect from you, basically. And so I want to do the right thing. I want to demonstrate the right thing so that I can show them what the right thing to do is.
Great. So one of my final questions is going to be, what did you leave behind in the military? If Ed were here, he would say the 24-hour clock. But is there anything that you thought, nope, this is not going to serve me any longer?
Wow, that's I'd have to put some thought into that. This is not going to serve me any longer. Well, it not necessarily that it's not going to serve me any longer, but I think it opened my eyes to who I am and not who I'm not. I was a much more braver, stronger, courageous person than I thought I was. So if anything, I was just going to put aside this young person or minor or child who joined the military, and from that point on, I was in charge of my own life. What I didn't add in the beginning, I was a bit of a runaway. So actually, the reason that I joined the military, I said it's either do that or become a loser, was because I had no direction. I was quite honestly a runaway, and so the military changed me into realizing that I can determine my own destiny, and now I have the tools to do that. And so I left behind the child, the punk rocker, the runaway, and I became a productive member of society. I'm still a punk rocker, but
very good. My husband is too. We just choose not to listen to music together. But all right. Well, is there anything else that you wanted to share with our listeners, or?
I'm just happy to be here with you. I really appreciate you bringing me on board. And yeah, I would just like to remind everyone, submit a 10-minute script. It's not that difficult. And we're looking for comedy. We want to laugh at the lighter side of being a veteran. A lot of the film that comes out about veterans can be a little down, quite honestly. And we want to turn that around, be positive.
Very good. Well, stick with me. But thank you so much for, spending your time with me today. Thank you for your service. And if, anybody out there is listening, definitely follow us if you like what you hear.